This video will contain spoilers for God of War 2018 and the original God of War trilogy. God of War has always been an iconic franchise in the world of video games. The game has always been known for its adrenaline-pumping combat, its amazing reimagining of Greek mythology, and our angry anti-hero protagonist Kratos. The original trilogy would introduce us to Kratos, a Spartan who was betrayed by the gods and later becomes one seeking out vengeance amongst the various Greek gods. This quest for vengeance would be a central theme to the original trilogy and the perception of Kratos as a character. That's why, at E3 2016, when fans got to look at the reboot for the first time, they were more than delighted to see an older Kratos make a return, and noticed a few things, like firstly, he's in the Norse world, secondly, he has a son. Fans were more than excited to get to play another God of War game, but were a little curious on what direction that this series was going in and where this game would take us. However, it is with great pleasure to say that God of War 2018 is beyond any shadow of a doubt one of the defining games of the PS4 generation. It reconstructed the franchise in a way that has modernized and evolved the gameplay formula whilst not abandoning the high-octane action that made it so enthralling in the first place. The beautiful vistas of the Norse lands, the magnificence in writing and storytelling, coupled with grand boss encounters, has shown a new opportunity for both Santa Monica Studios and Kratos to change. Before we discuss God of War 2018, I believe that it's important that we delve into a brief history of the series and the development behind this entry. In 2005, Santa Monica Studios would release their new IP, God of War, and gamers would finally get their chance to play as Kratos on his warpath for revenge. The combat loop for God of War was a hack and slash game with quick time button mashing moments to finish off enemies. The game was praised for its rendition of Greek mythology and its engaging combat, weapon variety, and overall brutal tone. The spectacle and action was jaw-dropping, providing an experience to the player that was a rush, a sense of awe that would enshrine God of War as a must-have for any PlayStation owner. I remember growing up and playing the original trilogy, along with the PSP game Chains of Olympus. The series was an incredible experience back in the day, and is still a testament to the level of depth and quality that the series is known for. The original God of War trilogy would build on its formula and grow in size, scale, and spectacle, with each title becoming more grander than the last. In 2010, the God of War trilogy would conclude. The studio would go on to make a prequel to the main trilogy, called God of War Ascension, which was met with mediocre to mostly positive reviews. But the tides in the gaming landscape were changing, and this was a turning point for reflection for Santa Monica Studios. The idea for a reboot stemmed from various factors, the first being the reviews for God of War Ascension, as many fans and critics suggested that the current formula for God of War was beginning to run dry. Some fans and journalists stated that Kratos would need to be killed off or see a drastic change, as some critics believed the character to be one-dimensional and shallow. Whilst I disagree with these sentiments and still hold my position that God of War has always had a compelling narrative, I can understand why Santa Monica took this feedback on board. The second factor was to do with Santa Monica Studios, who would go quiet for a few years after the release of God of War Ascension, partly due to this feedback, but in large part due to the layoffs that would hit the studio. The studio was able to recoup from this setback and rebuild both its studio and the vision for the God of War franchise going forward. The team would see Cory Barlog, the creative director for God of War 2, return as creative director for this new reboot project. Initially, the team had a few ideas, some that would stick around and some that would be subject to change. The concept for the father-son narrative came about early on and left some staff, particularly developers, with reservations about this change. These concerns came about primarily due to figuring out how to incorporate the character of Atreus and what gameplay elements would be involved to make the combat feel natural, as Kratos has always been a one-man army up until this point. There were many ideas that were pitched in the early stages of development, one seeing Kratos travel to the realm of Egyptian mythology. However, the studio settled on basing the new God of War in the realm of Norse mythology, as this was seen to be the best fit for Kratos the character. Now with the premise and setting established, the development would kick off into full swing and the casting for the roles would begin. The team began the hiring process for the roles of Kratos and Atreus and landed on Sunny Suljic early on in development. The search for Kratos, however, was a much more strenuous process, auditioning with various candidates. That is, until one day when Christopher Judge walked in and nailed the role as the old and wise Kratos that we know today. This new entry of God of War was a big departure from what the series was previously known for, and the team, and Cory Barlog in particular, had doubts about how fans would respond to the changes. Yet the team would continue to press on with development and march towards the first big reveal at E3 2016. Once God of War got its big reveal at E3 2016, the reception was outstanding, with fans gushing across the board in anticipation and with joy for the new direction and new life that the series had found, begging for a release date and waiting to get their hands on the game.
Oh, whoa, 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 hold up, hold up! Oh! Oh!
What the? No!
Oh!
The overwhelmingly positive reception would carry over to the release of the game, as on April 20th, 2018, when fans would finally be able to get their hands on the game was met with critical acclaim, and I can understand why. Let's roll it. This new entry in the God of War series would see the return of our anger-fueled Spartan Kratos, who has taken up a home and started a family in the Norse realms. However, there is a change in Kratos' demeanor, as he's trying to form a bond and connect with his son Atreus, and find peace to move on from the man he once was. Whilst the previous entries are not necessary to enjoy this game, this evolution to Kratos' character is delivered so well, having known the Kratos from before. But with that being said, the story starts off at a point that is still welcoming to newcomers of the series. God of War 2018 is narratively a much more intimate and cinematic experience, focused around the relationships between Kratos and his son Atreus. God of War's narrative is brilliantly portrayed through the simplistic premise of the father-son journey, where Kratos and Atreus set out to fulfill the dying wish of Kratos' wife Faye. However, through simplicity, there lies a wealth of depth in the relationship between Kratos and Atreus, and a broader journey, an individual journey that overlap, that await them both. This can be seen through Kratos' protective yet at times aggressive responses to Atreus, as he's trying to prepare his son and protect Atreus from any dangers that may come.
What are you doing? Now his guard is up. Only fire. Only fire when I tell you to fire.
But at the same time, Kratos struggles with the lingering past of the man he once was. With these thoughts in mind, Kratos decides to hide his true form from Atreus and their true nature in hopes of sparing him from a similar path and fate that he has walked. The flip side to this is Atreus, a young boy with a compassionate nature, trying to understand himself, his father, and his mother's intentions. Atreus is young and unsure of himself and who he is. This is expressed through his relationship with his father, as Kratos during Atreus' upbringing wasn't always around, leaving Atreus feeling somewhat disconnected from his father. Both these characters gel so well together due to these differences in personalities. The stoic demeanor of Kratos and Atreus' compassionate and emotional nature mesh so seamlessly into what ultimately culminates in both characters teaching each other how to be better. I think this can best be described by Cory Barlog himself, stating that both characters through the journey are teaching each other a lesson. Kratos is teaching Atreus how to be a god, and Atreus is teaching Kratos how to be human.
Look, all this time, there's been a protection stave around our entire woods. But the stave's broken there. Did you cut those down?
She hand marked the tree she wished used for her pyre.
Why'd she do that?
Come. No looking back now.
A large portion of God of War's compelling storytelling comes from not only the writing, but the delivery of the lines from both Kratos and Atreus. These moments of rest in between the gameplay that further connect us to these characters are some of the most touching moments, and the lines that are given in these segments are so well delivered that it feels like I'm watching a movie. But these outstanding performances shine across the board, across all the cast, and that is the other essential piece to the storytelling of God of War, and that is the supporting characters. God of War 2018 tackles many themes. I see change or being better as a core theme that is present throughout God of War 2018. And another theme that I find very essential to God of War 2018 is the idea of disconnected relationships, particularly with family. The theme of disconnected relationships amongst family is where God of War makes excellent use of its supporting characters. All the supporting characters play a role throughout the journey, aiding Kratos and Atreus through their journey, but also provide a source of reflection for development between Kratos and Atreus. The reason this works is that each supporting duo, whether it's the dwarven brothers Brock and Sindri, or Baldur's troubling relationship with Freya, provides some lesson or meaning that strengthens Kratos and Atreus' relationship. God of War is always foreshadowing and coupling the concepts of Norse mythology, but also at the same time hammering home this theme of connection and mending of these broken relationships, which comes around full circle, playing into the broader narrative themes and the more intimate narrative of Kratos and his son. The gameplay in God of War 2018 is a huge departure from its hack and slash roots, providing a more cinematic over-the-shoulder experience while still maintaining the third-person aspect. However, the DNA of what made a God of War game still lived on, with moment-to-moment melee-packed combat full of new combos and weapons for Kratos to take advantage of. The new addition to God of War was Kratos' new weapon, the Leviathan Axe. The beauty of the Leviathan Axe was that this weapon works both as a melee weapon and as a projectile, where you can throw and call it back, sort of like Thor's hammer. But the real cherry on top that makes this combat feel so immersive is how weighty and impactful each swing of Kratos' axe feels. The combat in God of War provides a much more in-depth variety of weapons and abilities available to the player. These abilities in their most basic form are light attacks and heavy attacks, and when holding down the respective buttons for these attacks, they can perform a charged attack. The Leviathan Axe is an incredible weapon in its feeling and usage. The satisfaction of throwing your axe at enemies and then freezing them, the chunky sounds of the axe spinning and knocking an enemy in the air. There is a strong level of competency that comes with the expression that's available to the player throughout the game, and how they can approach each of these encounters. While this approach to combat isn't necessarily revolutionary, it manages to sustain interest and remain engaging throughout your playthrough. But on top of how great and incredible the weapon is to use and the feeling you get from it, there's status effects and abilities that you can perform with your weapon. And then there's your son, Atreus, who's using his bow at your command to take down and stagger enemies. The game still provides remnants of gameplay mechanics found in its predecessors, through the use of QuickTime events to finish off minor bosses. These are over-the-top, bloody, gory scenes that you would expect from a God of War game, and there are a few of these type of moments that can be found in more pivotal cutscenes to provide QuickTime events that is also something that harkens back to the original trilogy. In retrospect, one aspect of the game that has seen a few cracks is the enemy variety available. God of War's combat truly shines and stands out during these challenging encounters. These can be found through boss encounters or optional encounters like the Valkyries. But outside of these unique encounters, the need for more diversity in enemy types can really be felt. There are a variety of about 6 or 7 enemy types, but throughout the main story you'll most of the time be dealing with 2, maybe 3, and you'll consistently encounter them. These are the Dragar and the Nightmares. This can cause some of those encounters to feel a bit repetitive, where enemies don't feel like they're evolving with the player or their skill set, and feel like they're more just fodder to get through to get to the next part. Fortunately, this isn't felt all the time, and on my original playthrough I didn't really notice this. It was more something that I encountered the second time around revisiting the game. I still loved my second time with it, it was just this was something that definitely could be felt when revisiting it. Speaking of returning to the roots of the original trilogy, the return of the Blades of Chaos in God of War 2018 is an incredible story moment and is a great mix-up and addition to the combat. The Blades of Chaos work as the fire to the Leviathan's ice, both in a literal sense and in its use of a combat approach. Where the Leviathan axe is a more forcible weapon with its weighty blows and hits and swings, the Blades of Chaos are a relentless, impactful weapon, throwing flurries of attacks and combos with their chains, staggering enemies blow after blow. During development, the team worked for 4 years to put effort into working on these weapons, primarily the Leviathan axe, with the last few months factoring in the Blades of Chaos to get this weapon out and into the game. And they've paid off in spades with how good these weapons feel to use in the game. Another departure that God of War 2018 takes is the less linear structure to its level design. God of War 2018's level design sits in a sweet spot where it isn't an open world game per se, but it's more aligned to something like an open zone based area for each of these explorable realms. These areas provide the player an open space to freely explore, littered with side quests, known as favors, and optional encounters. These open spaces and their activities offer a sizable amount of playtime to God of War, and work hand in hand with the level systems of the game, which we'll get into shortly. But where these open world elements shine is in allowing the player to re-explore places that they've previously ventured to through the story. But not only that, it provides a reason to re-explore these areas that fleshes out these environments. And can we just talk for a moment about how great some of these spaces look? Even for 2022 standards, they still hold up. This game is a great game to look at, and the soundtrack for this game, oh my god, chef's kiss. Seriously, one of the best soundtracks for a AAA game I've heard in a while. Holds up really well. So it's no surprise with how great these environments look that you want to revisit them, and it's great that you have a chance to through the use of these side quests, and it usually, most of the time, although some quests may feel a little redundant or a little fetch questy, there is a bunch of favors and things in the game that keep the game fresh and fun and feel unique, like you're doing an actual proper quest, whilst getting to revisit these environments, and it's a very welcome addition to the God of War formula. Each environment and realm in this game has its own intimate details and flourishes, making it feel memorable and distinct. It's been 4 years since God of War has released, and the graphical finesse and environmental design is just beyond incredible. One final departure that God of War 2018 takes from its predecessor is through the use of a gear system, a very modernized gaming system that is incorporated into many games. God of War has all the staples of those type of gear systems. You have your armor, you have different gear sets, you have weapons and modifications that you can make to these weapons. Some that come through the form of runics that you can equip to your weapons, and armor which comes with enchantments, which also plays into the rarity of each armor and how much damage things do, and it's a whole stat game there, typical stuff that you've experienced before. But the interesting part lies in the runic abilities. These runic abilities separate themselves much like a special attack, where they are on larger cooldowns but do larger damage. They incentivize the player to be strategic with how they're implemented, and Kratos, when using them, usually pulls off a badass animation, making it feel rewarding when you land a successful runic strike. There are plentiful of runics to be acquired throughout the game, and it keeps the combat for each weapon feeling fresh and fun as you acquire runics for each weapon throughout the game. There is a whole subset of skill trees that are provided in God of War 2018. These skill trees are usually mapped on to the primary weapons in the game, those being Atreus' bow, the Blades of Chaos, and the Leviathan axe. The implementation of these skill trees doesn't feel contrived, as every single unlock does feel like some form of progression to the actual gameplay, not just a minor stat increase or something of that nature. These unlocks will provide new ways to tackle enemies and new combos to just knock them on the floor and be a badass as Kratos. And throughout your gameplay, you'll continuously feel like you're evolving and finding new ways to tackle new enemies. It truly is as satisfying as it looks. Whilst God of War's combat and gameplay systems may not be revolutionary, they are competent and satisfying. They achieved that feeling that the team was going for, with each particular weapon feeling so weighty and meaty and strong, and you just feel like a god, legit. And the sense of progression that you get throughout the game does feel meaningful, with the skill trees and the runics providing a diverse way to tackle enemies. The Other stats though that come from armor and gears does feel a little redundant. I'm willing to overlook that for everything else that the game does so well.
This is incredible!
God of War 2018, upon release, would receive stunning reviews across the board, and dozens of these reviews would give the game a perfect score. Both critics and fans fell in love with this father-son duo and their journey. The title would sell over 5 million copies in the game's first month. The game as it stands now has sold a total of 23 million copies, and with the release of Ragnarok, I can only imagine that God of War 2018 would only grow in sales as people prepare and get up to date on the series. In 2018 at the Game Awards, God of War would go on to see nominations for many awards such as Best Game Direction, Best Action Game, and the monolith that is Game of the Year. It would go on to take home many of these awards, including that Game of the Year award. Ultimately, Santa Monica Studios took a chance to reimagine one of gaming's most beloved series and created something special and deserve all the immense success that they have received. In closing, God of War is a game that encompasses change in all departments. It achieves this through its semi-open, explorable worlds, a deeper combat system, and a compelling narrative. God of War is a game where characters are trying to fight who they are and the situations they face. It's a story focused on growth, change, and ultimately to be better. Not just for Kratos, but for Santa Monica as well, taking on a change to reinvigorate this series. God of War is a game that serves as a reminder to the level of finesse and quality that can come from a AAA studio when a game is produced and created right. Whilst this might be rare these days, God of War shows that it isn't impossible. This father-son journey will go down as a classic that will be remembered by gamers for a long time to come. God of War is a tale of change, and although change may not be easy, it's never too late to start. I'll be working on a continuation to the Norse saga, which will be God of War Ragnarok, and seeing how this sequel lives up to the high bar that its predecessor has set. Because simply put, God of War is a must-play and a must-have, and will go down as one of the PS4's masterpieces. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
On the day you were born, I made 2 knives, mixing metals from my home and from this land. One for myself, and when you were ready, one for you. Today is that day.
So I'm a man now, like you?
No. We are not men. We are more than that. The responsibility is far greater. And you must be better than me. Understand? Say it.
I will be better.